Hey, beautiful people. So, tonight I am going to tell you how I got my Asian American groove back. And so, like, when I grew up here in Chinatown, just a 10-minute walk away, I'm always thinking to myself, how can I feel like I'm in my groove? Like, I'm learning things, I'm meeting new friends, I'm going about the town, and then all of a sudden I get this question from some random person: where are you from? And that takes me right out of my groove. That makes me feel alien. Then they ask me, where am I really from? And I think to myself, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe we don't belong here, right? And even though I grew up with like 96% Chinese kids right here in Chinatown, I still felt like when I went to school, like I spoke English and my parents don't speak English. And when I go home, my parents are tired from work and I watch TV and it's silent in my house except that TV. And all I see are these white people, right? Or I see maybe three guys: Jackie Chan, Trini the Yellow Power Ranger, or Mulan, right? And so I feel totally displaced. And I think to myself, maybe I'm never gonna feel like I belong. And more so because of that silence at home, I always felt like I would never know my family history. And I feel like I want to ask my parents all these questions. Where are we from? Like, how did we get here? Like, what did you do here when you landed in America, right? And I got a hint of my family history from, of all places, a PBS documentary. The PBS documentary was aptly named Becoming American, The Chinese Experience. And it featured these protests of these people who looked like me, holding clever signs in English. I'd never even seen elders of mine speaking English. And it felt like maybe I'd connect one day to some kind of heritage. What were these people marching for? They were marching for this guy named Vincent Chin. Vincent Chin was a Chinese American man who was beaten to death in 1982. He was beaten to death by two white auto workers who assumed he was Japanese during the auto workers crisis in Detroit and blamed him for the loss of many jobs. They chased him, paid a guy off to find him, and beat him to death with a baseball bat the week before his wedding. The guys paid $3,000 and never served a day in jail for the murder of Vincent Chin. And all of these people who previously only associated with ethnicity, like Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, Filipino Americans, all came together to fight because they thought if this guy, Vincent Chin, could be killed, any one of them could be next. And they came under this term, many of them for the first time, Asian American. Now, this term came about in the late 1960s in California on colleges, but this was the first time for many people that they identified as Asian American. And 13-year-old me seeing this was like, wow, like maybe I get to be Asian American. Maybe this is my belonging. And then my mom walks by, and she sees this photo of Vincent Chin on the screen and says, "Go go hai le biu go." That is your older male cousin. What? And I go to her and I'm about to ask her all these questions. Who is he? Where is he from? Do we have family in the Midwest, in Detroit? And I look at her face and she's just pained. And I know I can't ask her any questions because it looks like she didn't mean to tell me this, but she knew she had to. But I really still wanted to know this family history, where I'm from, So I look for all the research I can. I find this documentary called Who Killed Vincent Chin, which the Asian American Alliance at Columbia filmed. And it featured heavily Lily Chin, Vincent Chin's mother. She went all over the country saying, "I want justice for my son." You can see Jesse Jackson next to her right there, Helen Zia, all of these activists wanting justice for Vincent Chin. But for me, she's my grandmother. She looks and sounds just like my grandmother. And she's speaking my native tongue, Toisanese. And I know she's mine, but I don't know how. And it takes me 10 years to finally ask some family member, who is she and how is she related to me? So I find out that indeed, so I asked my auntie in Michigan to help me make a family tree, and I find out that Lily Chin is my grandmother's sister. But not only that, Lily Chin had 9 sisters and a brother, which means my family tree is huge. We make a family tree and there's over 100 people on it, and most of whom are in America. And so now I'm like, what? There's more people that I have to figure out about? I put this family tree aside and focused on my teaching, my career, being a 20-something-year-old. And then I was about to turn 30 this year, and I decided I needed to learn my history. I started taking Cantonese classes, figuring out the Chinese dictionary on my phone, like the handwriting apps, and I was like, I have summer vacation. Let's go. Let's do this family history trip. And so I took 3.5 weeks last month, and I went to 3 states. I went to Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan for the start of this family history journey. So I first landed on the bottom left at my family's restaurant, where I see cousin after cousin taking orders, putting out egg rolls and wrapping up takeout containers with rice boxes. And I find out there's a restaurant in middle of nowhere, Illinois, that my family owns. I found out we had a restaurant in middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. We had a restaurant in the suburbs of Detroit. And I discovered that cousin after cousin after cousin had worked in these restaurants as teenagers and adults, folding egg roll after egg roll after egg roll. And that my family had to open restaurants in order to come here. My auntie in Chicago, she came in 1962, and her husband had to find work in the restaurants because that's the only job he could do. He helped open that restaurant in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. And Lily Chin, she had to figure out work, and her only job that she could do was either in the restaurants or in the laundry business. So she would take 2 buses in Michigan to get to laundries, right? And then she'd go into a house where they divided up spaces with makeshift curtains so that each woman would be able to do the laundry. And so I went to the site of a former restaurant, now a bank, right? Because my family decided, let's make bigger dreams and go to California. I went and saw the house where Lily Chin and Vincent Chin lived, and where all those activists came after Vincent Chin was killed, and how Lily Chin didn't want to take them to restaurants because she had worked in the back of a restaurant, and she knew how dirty it was in the back. So she cooked everything for all of these organizers who were fighting for Vincent. And then I walked by this lake with my other cousin, who would walk 40 minutes every time he could to take a break from his restaurant shift, right? And as I'm in these different places and these 3-story houses that are really different from the very small Chinatown apartment I grew up in, right, I realize our stories are very similar. Like this feeling of isolation, this feeling of alienation. I can't even imagine what it's like to grow up with all white people, right? And I realize with my cousins, we have some commonality of like dealing with Chinese patriarchy, dealing with wanting to build our dreams. And I feel like with them, I belong, right? And that question, where am I from, shifted to where do we belong, right? I kept telling cousin after cousin what my aunties told me. All of these stories I learned, which, by the way, I'm not telling the full details because I haven't gotten my family's permission to tell you all these stories. So that's why I've been kind of vague in telling you. But as I told details from my family, to the younger cousins, they were like, they thought they would never hear those stories. They had always been resigned. They were like, they were never going to tell us. We don't know Chinese well enough. But there's hope now that maybe now, like, we might be able to answer that question, where we're from. And I have to thank Lily Chin for this, because Lily Chin fought so hard to tell her son's story over and over and over again. So she had to leave for China because she was sick and tired of telling the story over and over and over again. But it is because she told her story that I now have hope that I will get my family history. But I also realized on this journey I had to ask for this. And I had to fight for this, just like Lily Chin had to fight to get some semblance of justice from the American system. Which means we have to fight, we have to ask. And maybe in our asking and our searching, we'll find some sense of belonging, but also be able to define for ourselves and not let other people define for us. Where are we from? Who are we? And where do we belong as Asian Americans? Thank you very much.